So we learned about polygenic inheritance, which basically means when multiple genes are are controlling one single character.
Yes,
So if every
multiple genes are controlling one single phenotype, we should say. Okay, character. Yeah, correct.
so we took the example of human skin color as it is given in the textbook.
Your
So
voice is a little muffled, Aisha. Are you using Bluetooth or something? Like, try changing anything that you can change, like your distance from the mic, or you're connected with Bluetooth. Mm, like, let's test something else. So your voice is muffled at the moment. It's a little difficult to understand. Parker, are you able to understand what Aisha is speaking?
Some parts yes, some parts no, sir.
Some words. Okay. Okay, Aisha, let's go again. Oh, Aisha has some issues with the mic. That's why. Okay, no issues. Then I will take over. And Rabia has also joined in. Good evening, Rabia.
Good evening, sir.
Yeah, great. We can hear you crisp and clear. So would you like to go and give a summary with me? It was me and Aisha doing, but Aisha's mic is has some issues. So how about you start and I'll follow up with you. Rabia?
Okay, so
Yeah, cool. Rabia, if you're speaking, you're mute. You have to unmute and go. You can see the board, right?
yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the previous class, we discussed about polygenic inheritance. In that,
Yeah. What is polygenic inheritance?
yeah,
But
in
yeah.
that multiple genes give rise to one trait,
Yeah,
and
or you can say multiple genes control one phenotype. Because the part where we say give rise to is not very well researched, but we know that it modulates and controls. Okay. So it's good to say that multiple genes, when regulate or control one phenotype or one particular character, that's polygenic inheritance for that character. Okay.
yes, sir.
Hmm. Go ahead.
Then we take some examples. For example, skin color in humans. It is controlled by melanin, which is a pigment protein, and if the melanin is high, then it gives rise to a then uh, if the melanin is more in a person, then the skin color of that person is dark, and if
Yes.
melanin is less in the person, then the skin color of the person is very fair.
Mhm.
Then we wrote the dominant and recessive alleles, and
We just took an example that if more than one genes are controlling this character, then let's assume that there are four genes, A, B, C, D, and capital letters represent their dominant traits and small letters represent their recessive alleles. And if a person, like the highest amount of skin color that a human can get genetically will then depend on all the dominant alleles in a person coming from parents, both the parents. And the fairest skin is a resultant of all recessive alleles coming from both the parents, right? So capital A, capital A, capital B, capital B, capital C, and capital D will lead to the highest production of melanin in that case, and all small alphabets will lead to the most recessive alleles and the lowest production of melanin. But remember, I also talked about something else that can affect polygenic inheritance. What was that, Rabia? That was environment. Okay. Skin color is also affected or regulated by environmental factors. The most important factor, like in this case, the factor is exposure to sunlight. So if a person is exposed to sunlight for a very long time, that also induces melanin production in the skin. Okay. So it's not solely regulated and controlled by genetics. Is it clear? All three of you?
Yes.
Yeah. Then we went, another example is height in humans. I asked you to go back and look for examples in plants and animals around you. Did anyone from Rabia and Aisha do that? Did you figure out any example of polygenic inheritance in animals and plants around you? No? No one is interested to go beyond the textbook. Okay, no problem. That's fine. Oh, I think I got a chat. Aisha says milk and egg production in animals. So milk and egg production is not a character. It's like producing tears and producing saliva. It's not a character, it's a process. But I'm not sure about process of milk production, whereas polygenic inheritance in that. But there is polygenic inheritance in some characteristics related to egg, especially the egg of the shelled, like organisms that give rise to a shelled egg, like birds and reptiles, because amphibians and mammals, their eggs do not have a shell around it. Okay. When I say mammal's egg or human's egg, I mean the oocyte. So it doesn't have a shell. Amphibians lay eggs, but those are again without shell. But birds and reptiles lay eggs with shells. And there, in case of birds, we have a polygenic inheritance. Would you like to elaborate on it, Aisha? What do you mean by milk and egg production in animals? I genuinely don't know exactly where in milk production polygenic inheritance could come in. Maybe there is. I'm not very sure of it. Maybe Aisha can tell us if you have figured it out. Are you there, Aisha? I think Aisha is not able to speak. But okay. How many of you have seen? Okay, Rabia has one more example. What about the wheat kernel? Yes, what about the wheat kernel? You're right. That is one good example for polygenic inheritance, but what about it?
Sir, if one color of a wheat kernel is crossed with a different color, like for
Okay.
suppose red is crossed with white, then in the next generations they might have different colors of like different shades of red, and I think
Okay.
white.
Okay, so you mean to say that different varieties of wheat have different gradation of the kernel color, like it is in the human skin color, and that is where you are saying that there is a polygenic inheritance. Is that what you are saying?
Yes.
Yes, perfect. So that's a good example. In Aisha's case, where she talked about egg. So you know that egg. How many of you have seen egg shells of even for the poultry, like for the chicken? There are different kinds of eggshell colors and eggshell. Um, you know, what do you say? Thickness is also very micron level. It's different. Okay. So and also the size. So these three things about the egg are not controlled by one single gene. It also makes sense to understand this because see, egg formation is such an important process for continuation of species in birds that if there is one single gene that is necessary for the production of eggshell, if that gene gets mutated, the bird no longer can make eggshells, right? So any organism would not like to depend on just one single gene for something as crucial as eggshell formation. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, perfect. Good. So you people did that. Good. Now then we went on to pleiotropic inheritance. Rabia, what is pleiotropic inheritance? Quickly.
Pleiotropic inheritance, in which a single gene controls a lot of phenotypes, like multiple phenotypes.
Yes. An example. We did one, which was
Yeah.
yeah.
Example is phenylketonuria.
So phenylketonuria is a what is it? It's a metabolic disorder where basically phenylalanine, which is an amino acid that is converted into tyrosine in normal conditions in our body. And for that, you need an enzyme called phenylalanine hydroxylase. Now, this enzyme is coded by one single gene. And if there is any mutation in that one single gene and phenylalanine can no longer become tyrosine, then it starts accumulating. It starts getting accumulated in the body. And upon this accumulation, you will see that it will now convert into phenylpyruvic acid instead of tyrosine. And this phenylpyruvic acid, when it gets stored or accumulated in different tissues, it causes different phenotypes. If it gets accumulated in brain tissues, it causes mental retardation. So that's one phenotype controlled by the same mutation and the same gene. It also can lead to skin depigmentation. So it affects skin pigmentation, another phenotype, which is related to skin epithelium. And it also leads to hair loss and hair depigmentation as well, which is a different phenotype. So three different phenotypes, but all controlled with one single gene. So that's pleiotropic inheritance. Is it clear? Mariam has joined in. Good evening, Mariam. You missed last class, I guess.
Yes, sir.
Are you not well?
No, sir, I'm fine.
Okay. So is there any specific reason you missed classes?
Sir, I was having exams.
I see. Okay. Try not to miss classes, okay, as much as you can.
Okay, sir.
So in today's class, we'll first talk about the process of sex determination in organism. Now, for humans, we already have discussed it multiple times. So for humans, we already know how genetically a sex is determined in a fetus, right? So we know that from our mother, we get half the set of genome, which is ovum is haploid. And from father also, we get half set of genome. That's why sperm is also haploid. And in that half set from the mother, which we are getting, there will be 22 autosomes, right? Plus one allosome. And that allosome, in case of what mothers will give, is a X chromosome, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then we get from the father's side, we get the same 22 autosomes. All these will be homologous to the chromosomes that mother has, plus again 1 allosome. But in this case, it is Y chromosome, right? So if you're thinking about why these chromosomes are called X chromosome and Y chromosome, it's just that the person who discovered this is called Henking. So Henking was working with he was a scientist who was working with eggs of insects. Okay, and he realized that there is this body which is actually a chromosome, and by that time people could stain chromosomes, as I have already discussed with you. So he realized that only half of the eggs, half of the sperms are getting this particular chromosome, okay, during spermatogenesis. Other half is not getting it, and it was a big chromosome which could be seen easily by microscopy. So he called it the X body because the structure looked like, under the karyotyping, it looks something like this. This is how chromosome looks like. So he did not know about all other chromosomes, but he called it, oh, it looks like X, so he called it X body. Basically, he was seeing a chromosome, nothing else. And later on, when people figured out, oh, it's the chromosome, so they just change it to X chromosome. So that's how all our chromosomes from chromosome number 1 to 23, which is the X, they look more or less like a X. Sometimes the difference will be that the crossing of the X, some chromosomes will look like this, some will look like this, some will look like this, right? Depending on where you have your centromere. But yeah, more or less, we can say it looks like X. Okay. So that's why we started calling it X chromosome. And what was in the other sperm was the Y chromosome, and Y chromosome is very small as compared to X chromosome. This also prevents X and Y from forming a pair, though they are inherited as a pair, but they are not homologous chromosome. Do you understand that? What was the definition of homologous chromosome? Well, this is a question. Which of the following chromosome pair is not a homologous chromosome? The allosome pair in a male body is not a homologous pair, because the allosome pair in a male body is X and Y chromosome. These two are not homologous chromosome. Why? Can anyone tell me why these are not homologous chromosomes?
Because they don't have the same length.
It's not, yes, one, you're right. They don't have the same length, but it's not only about length. What was the definition of a homologous chromosome? Length is one criteria, yes, correct. What are homologous chromosomes capable of that heterologous chromosomes are not? They are capable of forming a chiasmata and doing a crossover to exchange material between their non-sister chromatids, correct?
Yes.
Yes, and to do that, homologous chromosomes need to be of same length, like Rabia correctly pointed out. And more importantly, they also contain the same genes at the same locus. There might be different alleles for the same gene present in two homologous chromosomes, but their position, their locus, their length, and the number of genes that they carry, everything will be same. In case of X and Y pair, that is not true. Y is a very small chromosome and it only contains somewhere around more or less 200 genes, not more than that. And most of these genes that Y chromosome carries is for male secondary sexual characters and development of the testes, which is the male primary gonads. Whereas what X contains is entirely different. X also contains some normal genes. For example, you must be knowing about hemophilia, color blindness. All these genes are also present on X chromosome. Okay, so X chromosome can be present in both males and females. Males have one copy, females have two copies, but Y chromosome is exclusively present in males. It can't be present in a female. because it has male specific genes in it. Does it make sense, everyone? Yes, no? Okay. So in humans, the process of sex determination is where males are XY, and this condition we called heterogamous. So males are heterogametic. Hetero means different, gamous means gametes. So they are capable of forming two different type of gametes. Whereas females, and this we are talking about humans, females are XX, and this condition is called homogamous or homogametic. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
But it's not true for all conditions. So in humans, there is male heterogamity. But if you see in birds, there is a female heterogamity. Insects are more like humans in their sexual determination, if they have a genetic sexual determination. In insects, again, the males have X and Y, and the chromosome name is same because it was first discovered in insects only. And females are X and X, okay? Which is more like what humans are. So here also male are heterogamous and females are homogamous. But you have to remember in birds, it's quite different. In birds, the males are homogamous, and here we call it Z and Z. So males contains Z and Z, so they are homogamous. Just a different nomenclature for birds. They are still chromosome. It's not like they look like Z. We just named it. And females are Z and W. Okay, so there is a female heterogamity in birds. So just remember it. Let's write down. Birds have female heterogamity in terms of sex determination, whereas insects and humans have male heterogamity. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So the mechanism where the male sperm, the male gamete decides sex is called male heterogamety. And the mechanism where the female gamete decides the sex upon fertilization is called female heterogamety. Okay. Cool. Yeah. So it's clear for humans. Now let's go to one so this is where it's all genetic and there are one pair of chromosomes and always one different pair defines sex. So this is one way. Sometimes some insects have another method. So we are just, how many of you have seen Jurassic Park? Anyone who has seen the movie famous series Jurassic Park? Yes, right.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so if you have seen Jurassic Park, you must be knowing there was a very famous scene. So all the dinosaurs that they were creating, the scientists were creating in that park, they were all females, right? Remember, they were all females in the first part. If you don't remember, okay. Their idea was to not make any male so that they can, mate and give rise to progenies outside in the park, and because they wanted to control the population. So everyone was a clone kind of a thing and produced from the same genome that scientists encoded. So that was the logic behind it. But somewhere in the middle, you will realize that they say, okay, now one female laid eggs without a male. And even those eggs, there were both males and females that could come out of it. Because in dinosaurs were basically what? Were they mammals? What were they? Reptiles, amphibians?
Reptiles.
They were reptiles. So in reptiles, temperature also plays a major role in defining sex sometimes. So many reptiles, their sex determination depends on the temperature on which the egg is incubated while the embryo is developing inside. So for example, turtles and tortoises are very, very susceptible to temperature for their sex determination. That's why it is said that due to climate change and global warming, if the average temperature of the ocean starts rising up, many of the reptiles that live in oceans, their ecosystem, their species is more vulnerable to get extinct, because you will see only one kind of sex taking birth, and the other sex will start diminishing, and over time the population will decline and won't be able to survive or spread around. So temperature as a physical factor also can play a decisive role in sex determination. But that we are not talking about the mechanism in detail here, but I'll tell you about another mechanism that takes place in honeybees. So what do you know about honeybees? Anyone who know something about honeybees? Anything that you know? Their sting is the first thing. I start with that. But not all honeybees sting. That's also an important thing you should know. So no one knows anything else about honeybees. What do honeybees do? Where do they live? How do they live? Are they social organism? Are they solitary organism? You must be knowing a lot of things about it, right? Tell me some quick facts. Okay, it's strange that no one knows anything about honeybees. Honeybees are one of the most important pollinators for many of our flowers and crops. So they're very important for our economy as well. But honeybees have a very social structure in which they live. Their hives have division of labor. And that division of labor is not just behavioral, it's also genetic. So honeybees always have a queen in their hive, right? And that queen, as the name suggests, it's a female, okay? There is no concept of a king in a beehive, only a queen. And a queen is the only female in the hive that can lay eggs. So apart from queen, what else are there in the hive? Am I audible, people?
The other bees.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So Aisha says there are drones. Okay, what are drones? So there is a queen bee, which I told about. Aisha says there are drones. Anyone would like to tell about drones? And what else?
There are
Give it a try.
worker bees as well, right?
There are worker bees as well. Okay, that's great. So what are drones and what are worker bees? Are they male, female?
Drones are male and worker bees are female.
Drones are males and worker bees are females. Correct. So, and queen bee is also female, right?
Yes.
So we have a queen bee that is a female. We have worker bees and they are also female. And then we have drones and they are males. Okay, so what is the difference between queen bee and worker bees? Both are females, right? But I told you that only queen bee can lay eggs. Then why can't worker bees lay egg? They're also females, right? They can lay eggs. Yes, no?
Because like they're the worker bees, so they take care of the hive.
Yeah, right. They take care of the hive. So you think that they take care of the hive so they don't get time to, find a partner, undergo sexual reproduction and lay eggs. They're so busy bees that they don't lay eggs. Queen bees laying eggs all the time. So there's a very interesting hierarchy maintained in the hive. So queen bee secretes a pheromone. She releases a chemical in the hive, and all other females who get in contact with that chemical as a pheromone, they become sterile. So queen bee keeps all other females sterile. Okay. And drones are males. So all the males can only approach the queen bee to deposit their sperms in queen bee's spermatheca, and queen bee then can undergo sexual reproduction and can lay more eggs. Okay. So all the worker bees and all the drones which are there in the hive technically have come from one or the other queen bee. If not the present queen bee, then the queen bee which was before that. And how is queen bee made? So a queen bee is selected once a queen bee is about to die. Before she dies, it is the worker bees that select another larva and feed it with royal jelly. Royal jelly is nothing but a very nutritious mixture of whatever they have collected from the flowers, kept in few chambers in the hive. So they put one larva in that chamber, and the larva that feeds on royal jelly grows better, have functional ovaries, and become the queen bee again. So the hive always needs a queen bee, but it's chosen by the worker bees, not in a democratic manner, but yes, chosen. Yeah. And yes, is that clear, everyone?
Yes.
And the concept of male and female in bees is decided by one phenomena which is called haplodiploidy. Haplodiploidy method of sex determination. What does it mean is that if any bee has 2N, like it's diploid. So any embryo that is diploid, a diploid embryo will always develop into a female. Okay. And a haploid embryo, you know by now what is a diploid and haploid, correct?
Yes,
Develops into
sir.
a male. Now you must be thinking, how can a haploid be a embryo, right? So so that you're not confused, let me remove the term embryo and put a term egg. So, okay. In this case, I'm using the word zygote because diploid zygotes are diploid, and I'm putting here egg. So technically, queen can form egg in its body, right?
Yes.
So let's start with a queen. So this is a queen bee, and she is a female, and she is diploid, right? Now this queen bee formed eggs. So if she produced eggs, her eggs will be haploid or diploid? Eggs are always haploid, right? So let's say this is one way where she produces eggs, And these eggs are fertilized by sperms. Sperms are again haploid, and these sperms come from drones, which are males. Okay. And if they are males, drones will be haploid again. So they are haploid organisms that make haploid sperm. So can anyone tell me, we are preparing a neat question here. When drones, which are the male bees, when they are producing sperm, what process they will be using to produce their gametes? And this is one exception of gamete production in biology. Remember, I told you that meiosis as a cell division is only used for gamete production in organisms, right? In humans, all other cells divide mitotically, only gamete cells divide meiotically, correct?
Yes, sir.
But in case of bees, male drones produce sperms through simple mitosis because they are haploid and they have to form a haploid gamete. They cannot undergo meiosis because you cannot make haploid into half. There is no concept of half n. But queen bee, who's diploid, when she will make eggs, she will do it through the process of meiosis. Is it clear?
Yes.
So,
Isn't it very interesting to see that in the same organism, males are making sperms differently and females are making making ovum like gametes differently. So this process where sperm meets the egg is called fertilization, right? And fertilization is a characteristic of sexual reproduction. So as a result of sexual reproduction, what will form is a diploid zygote, right? And it will develop into embryo, and that will become a female bee. In this case, a worker bee, right? And it is 2n. Is it making sense, everyone?
yes, sir.
Okay, sorry. Should take this. In other pathway, female bee again made an egg. Now egg is haploid, but let's say this egg could not get any sperm or the female did not fertilize this egg. So it stays unfertilized. So it remains unfertilized and still undergoes an embryogenesis. And in this case, this embryogenesis will exactly be like all the cells will have just the same copy which came from the queen bee. So basically, all these embryos are like a clone of their mother only, right? Yes or no? Because there
Yes,
is
sir.
no other gamete with which it can fuse or make any recombinants. So it undergoes embryogenesis, which gives rise to a haploid embryo. And this becomes the male, which is the drone. So it is haploid. Sorry. It is a haploid male. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So this kind of a sex determination process in biology is called haplodiploidy method, and it is present in bees. A lot of question comes from this part because it is slightly confusing. So please draw it with your own hands and let me know if there is any doubt regarding this. And then I will ask some questions. And also keep writing the number of chromosomes. So queen bee, their diploid number is 32 chromosomes. 2n is equal to 32 chromosomes and N is equal to 16 chromosomes. Okay. Is that clear? Who all have this process clear in their head? Without any doubt. Okay, Rabia has this process clear. Aisha has this process clear in her head. What about Mariam? Mariam is also clear with this concept. And what about you, Parker? Is this concept clear to you? Parker, is this process clear to you? No. Okay. So let's go over this again. So what I was saying is, let's start with the queen bee because she's the only fertile female in the beehive. Okay. All other females are infertile in the beehive. They are females, they are diploid, but they cannot lay eggs. And the reason I told you, because the queen bee maintains their infertility by releasing some chemicals, pheromones, which keeps does not allow the gonads, which is the ovaries of these other females, to develop. Is that clear? It's like quite dictatorial, but yeah, this is how the setup is. Like that's how monarchs function, right? Kings and queens function. But queen bee also take care. Without a queen bee, the whole hive will just go into chaos. Okay, so she's very crucial for this setup to work. So bees are not at all democratic. Okay, they can also, if you trap the queen bee, if you kidnap a queen bee from a hive, the whole hive, all the swarms, worker bees and drones, they will just follow you to rescue their queen. Kind of, that's the behavior. They can't live without their queen. So let's start with queen bee, which is a female and diploid and fertile. Now she can lay eggs. She can form eggs in her body, which is her gametes. If the egg gets fertilized by the sperms of male bees, which are called drones, and drones are haploid, sperms are also haploid. So drones form sperms through mitosis because this is the only way through which they can form sperms, because meiosis is reductional division. Queen makes eggs through meiosis. Okay, female makes eggs through meiosis and male makes sperm through mitosis in honeybees world. And if there is a sexual reproduction, fertilization takes place and a diploid zygote is formed, and a diploid zygote will always give rise to a female bee. In this case, they all will be worker bees because there is already a queen bee in the hive. If the queen bee is about to die or old or dies, then this female bee, when the egg is laid, when they are larvae, one of the larvae is selected to become the next queen bee. So this is understood how females are formed. Females are always diploid and they are formed from sexual reproduction, fertilization of male and female gametes. Whereas to form males, the same queen bee, let's say, formed eggs, but the eggs stayed unfertilized. There was no fertilization. So these unfertilized eggs, which are basically haploid, will go on and form haploid embryos. They will develop into male. Okay. And I'm sorry, I think I said that they will be like clones to their mother. They will not be actually, because mother is doing meiosis to make eggs. So there will be recombination during meiosis. Okay, so there will be different characteristics. So these males, drones, won't be clones of their queen mother. Okay, they will have varieties and differences. Okay, yes. So this is how a male is formed. It is always haploid and unfertilized, and the female is always diploid and fertilized. Is this process clear to all of you, Rabia, Parker, Mariam, and Aisha?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Parker? Okay, great. Now here comes the question that comes in exams and entrances. If you look at this whole scenario, do you realize that all male bees only have mothers? Male bees do not have their fathers, right? Is it clear? Does it make sense?
Yes, sir.
And all the male bees can only give rise to daughters. They can never give rise to sons. Does it also make sense? Because the moment a male bee's sperm will fuse with the egg of a female bee, which is queen, it will lead to sexual reproduction. And as a result of sexual reproduction, there will always be a female bee forming. So all the drones after reproduction can only give rise to worker bees, which are females. So drones can never give rise to more drones. They cannot be fathers of more drones. So in a beehive, there is no drone who had a father, and there is no drone who will have a son. Make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's where you should write down. This is the point you need to remember, that write down in honeybees, males in bracket you can write drones, do not have father and also cannot have sons, right? Also cannot have sons. Can a female have father? A female bee can have father?
Yes, sir.
Of course. But can a female bee have daughters?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Can a female bee have sons?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Can a male bee have grandmothers? These are all the questions that have come. So, can a male bee have a grandmother?
Yes, sir.
Of course. Can a male bee have grandfathers?
Yes, sir.
Yes, correct. But only one person is answering all the questions. I'm expecting that others are also understanding. It's good, Paka. I'm not saying you should not answer. So all your answers are correct. So male bees cannot have fathers, but they can have grandfathers, right? Makes sense because their mother came from a father. So they technically have a grandfather, but they can never have a father. They cannot have sons, but can they have grandsons? Can male bees have grandsons?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So just write this down. Male bees cannot have a father and cannot have a son, but they can have a grandfather and grandson. Okay. So this is a very interesting haplodiploidy method of sex determination, which takes place in honeybees. Honeybees, by the way, are also insects, but they have these special kind of sex determination, which makes them different from other insects like fruit flies, which are a very good model system for research, and mosquitoes and cockroaches and all. Okay, cool. So your house flies also have the normal like XX heterogamety and homogamety models. Okay, cool. So now let's move forward if this part is clear. And so about the sexual reproduction, we understood linkage, recombination, sex determination, how genetics decides sex determination. And I also briefly talked about reptiles where it's not the genetics, but the environmental factor like temperature that decides sex determination in the embryo. Okay. Now, what is the other way in biology that you think can lead to variation in organisms, if not recombination and meiosis in sexual reproduction? Is there any other method through which variations can arise? Think. When I ask variations can arise, ask yourself, what is a variation? What is a variation? A modified or a different type of allele, right? Any change in the gene where it becomes slightly different is a variation, right? So apart from meiosis, yes, Parker, when chromosomes are different, more than chromosomes, I think you should say, you might not find chromosomes different if one gene is mutated on the chromosome. Chromosome will still look the same. It will still be homologous chromosome. So two homologous chromosomes are different because their alleles they are carrying are different. But when you look under microscope, they look the same. But you're right. They're different in terms of their gene sequence. So one way to make them different is to make different combinations by shuffling alleles here and there through recombination and crossing over. Is there any other way by which you can generate variations? Yes, Aisha is saying chromosomal abnormalities. Chromosomal abnormalities mostly lead to disease condition. It is a variation, you're right, but it's not very good variation for an organism. But how does abnormalities happen? Tell me. That will give you an answer. You're right. Forget about chromosomes. You people are looking too much into details. Think at a gene level, at an allele level. Where did variations came from? How can they come? If there is no sexual reproduction, then you have studied in your lower classes. For example, let's take an example of bacteria. So bacteria reproduces asexually, correct? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
So you must have studied in your textbooks, in your junior classes, that in a bacteria, all the daughters that a bacteria form after binary fission, they all are clones to the mother cell, right?
Yes.
But what if I tell you that that concept is not totally accurate? It is true that if there is no variation, then they all will be clones. And you can tell me that, of course, Rahul, there cannot be variations because they are not undergoing sexual reproduction. There is no meiosis. There is no crossing over. Alleles are not getting shuffled between two chromosomes. So there will, of course, be no variation. Hence, they are clone. And if you say that, you are totally correct. But then I ask you a question, because when we read biology, we just don't read and remember. We question, we argue, we find logic in it. If all bacteria are clones to their ancestors, and you make one drug that kill one bacteria, it should theoretically kill every bacteria, right? If something is a poison to the mother cell, it should be poison to the daughter cells because their genetics is exactly identical, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
But does that happen? Haven't you heard of antibiotic resistant strains of bacteria? That this strain of bacteria is antibiotic resistant. Antibiotics are not able to work on it. We are not able to cure diseases properly using antibiotics now. You are going to become doctors. So do you know about this, that antibiotic resistance is a problem? Yes, no, what? People discuss. It's a very interesting topic, but if you don't discuss, I can just, ignore, move forward, and all you have to do is remember. Mugging up is never a good idea to learn biology. Tell me, do you know that antibiotics do not work the same on all bacterial cells? Yes or no? Yes. Parker says yes, sir, with capital YES. Great. So you know that. But my question is why? If all bacterial cells are clones of their mothers, then we were able to kill bacteria 40 years ago. When Alexander Fleming, not 40, it's like 70, 80 years ago, when Alexander Fleming figured out, or almost 100 years ago, I'm sorry. No, not 100, less than 100. Second World War, he figured out, right? Yes. So around, let's say 80, 90 years ago, when Alexander Fleming figured out penicillin, he discovered penicillin, it saved millions and millions of lives because now you could treat bacterial infections like magic. Today, if you use the same penicillin, many of the bacterial cells will still survive and there can be a recurring infection. You treat it with antibiotics, but if you don't complete the dose, the infection will come back again. You know about it, right? It's a big problem in medical science.
Yes, sir.
So why is it happening? Did you ask when they taught you in class 9th and 10th that all bacterial cells are clones of each other? Did you ask them that if they're clones of each other, why the same medicine doesn't work on all the bacterial cells? Because in humans, they give you the reason. Teachers always tell you any medicine will not work exactly the same, even paracetamol. You give paracetamol to someone, their fever will come down in 4 hours. If you give the same paracetamol to someone else who has the same fever, it may or may not work with same intensity because all our genetics are different. A lot of differences in our physiology, in the way our body interacts with drugs, our receptors, etc., etc. Not everyone can tolerate sugar. Not everyone can tolerate same amount of bitter things because our genetics are slightly different. Bacteria are identical. I'm giving you 30 seconds and someone should start speaking. Parker is already writing. It depends on the person's immunity. Yes, Parker, you're right. It depends on the person's immunity, and immunity depends on genetics big time. But what about bacteria? Do they also have different immunities? Come on. Tell me yes, no, something. No, sir. Parker says no, they don't have different immunities. Then why can we kill some bacteria and we can't kill some other bacteria, which are the same species? I'm not talking about different species also, the same species. Now, are you convinced that there might be variations in their genome? Yes or no? Yes, Parker got convinced. Aisha says, due to variation in bacteria that helps them survive in different environment. Perfect, Aisha. So which means you are just neglecting and you are just discarding everything you were taught in junior classes. So you mean to say that bacteria are not clones of each other? So class 9 textbook is all false. Yes. 9th and 10th is all false. Come on. It's all about you. We are discussing science in a science class. We are discussing the caveats of how science syllabus is. You need to understand this. But only if you want to. Otherwise, I'll just shut up and move ahead. if you're not interested in knowing about why bacteria are different. No, sir, it's not false. Okay, too much of faith in books. Great to see that. So what is happening then? If it's not false, of course it's not false. You know, they'll not teach you wrong things. But sometimes it's the information is outdated, or the complexity of the information is revealed to you in higher classes. For that level, you needed to understand that bacteria undergo asexual reproduction, and hence they form clones. That was correct. It's not a false information. But what happens that makes bacteria different then? Clearly something happens that makes some bacteria different from other. Now that is what we are going to talk about the next. Anyone has any idea what I'm talking about? Something that is independent of sexual and asexual mode of reproduction, something that can happen to both the same. What can happen anytime and is not under anyone's control? Accidents, right? Accidents can happen anytime, correct? A biological yes. Parker said death. Yes, the ultimate truth of life. But till we are living, let's settle for accidents. Okay, let's not go so dark. Okay, we are living and we are studying living systems. So let's talk about life. But in life, something that can happen is accidents, mistakes, right? Mistakes are a characteristic feature of biology, not just biology, but any natural science, and it can happen. Similarly, in our genomes, there can be mistakes that can happen when the genome is replicating. Whether you are reproducing sexually or asexually, every organism needs to replicate its DNA, right? Because you have to pass on to the next progeny. A bacterial cell will produce daughter cells and it will pass on some genes to the daughter cells. So it had just one copy of it. Now, if it has to make two daughter cells, it first has to replicate its own DNA. No need to make gametes, no need to undergo meiosis, no need to do recombination, no need to do crossing over, but still there is a need to replicate the DNA. Yes or no? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And during replication, when you are copying the information from one strand to another, there can always be mistakes. Instead of adenine, you can put, cell can mistakenly put guanine or something else, okay? And those mistakes are called mutations, okay? So mutations are another way through which biology makes variations without the need of sexual reproduction. In sexually reproducing organisms, also mutations happen. And in asexually reproducing organisms, also mutation happens. Mutation happens regardless of what mode you reproduce through. Mutation can happen through a lot of reasons. It can happen through chemical reasons, physical reasons, biological reasons. So first, what is mutation? Mutation is, write down, it is a sudden, random, and inheritable. Sudden, random, and inheritable change in the genetic material. In the genetic material of an organism. Now, genetic material can be DNA. It mostly, for most of the organisms, it's DNA. It can also be RNA, like it is for some viruses. Okay. So it is a sudden, random, directionless. So when I say random, I also mean in any direction, good or bad. Mutations are not always good. In fact, most of the mutations are bad. then why do we never get to know of them? Because those mutations are lethal. An organism will not even survive, or the cell will not even survive, or the embryo will not even survive. So they never come to light and we never study and discover them. Only mutations which are beneficial sometimes, beneficial, get selected in the organism's population and continue to be passed on from one generation to another. For example, let's say there is a colony of bacteria living in a pond. Okay. Everyone is with me at the moment, people?
Yes, sir.
So there is a colony of bacteria living in a pond. There are, let's say, 100 bacterial cells in that colony. Suddenly, the water temperature of the pond started increasing. Let's say it was 25-degree, very sweet room temperature pond. It was not a very big pond. And then one day, Parker and Aisha took bucket loads of hot water and mixed it with the pond water, and the temperature started rising. They are doing it every day. So every day, one hot bucket of water they're adding into the pond. Now it's a small pond, and let's say it makes a difference. So over days and weeks, the mean temperature of the pond will keep increasing. Yes or no? Yes. Does it make sense? This happens, by the way, naturally through warming and cooling up of things. Climate change is one example. And now when the temperature starts rising up and up and up, there's a change of 1 degree, which let's say everyone can tolerate, but they are clearly uncomfortable. Then there is a rise of 2 degrees, 3 degrees. Now this is really uncomfortable, and bacterial cells starts dying. Those who cannot survive this change in temperature will start dying because their metabolism will be affected, their division, their enzymatic activity, their nutrition, their movement of or uptake of nutrition will be affected due to temperature, and they will die. But some of them, while they were trying to replicate, got a mutation in one gene that allowed them to make a different kind of a channel protein. Let's say different kind of a protein which is present on their membrane, and that protein helps them even in a high temperature to take in nutrition and do metabolism. Now these bacteria, just because of a mutation, got an advantage. Do you understand?
Yes.
The other one will vanish. In those also, there must have been mutations happening, but we never got to know of them because none of those mutations helped them to survive. In fact, some of them, worked against and were the reasons because of which they died. So they died. Only those survived over generations which had helpful mutations. So people started believing earlier that mutations are all helpful, but no, around 99% of the mutations are deleterious. So how I explain mutation is, think of a beautiful painting you have made. You have made a beautiful scenery of a forest landscape. There are trees, there is a sun, there are clouds, some mountains, some water bodies, and the painting looks very beautiful. Everything is in its own place. Okay. Now think of mutation as something like I tie a blindfold on your eyes and ask you to pick any random brush and dip in any random paint and touch and make a stroke on your painting. So 98 out of 100 times, you will end up making the painting more beautiful, or you will end up destroying the painting. You're making a small, you're making a small stroke only, very small stroke, but most of the time you will end up, let's say, taking a very wide brush, dipping it into white and touching it in the area where you have made trees. So it will look like, oh, what is this white spot on green trees? So again, the painting is destroyed. But sometimes just by sheer chance, you will end up like if I do it with 1,000 people 1,000 times, there might be one time where you will pick the right brush, dip it in the right paint, and touch at the right position where it will just either make no difference or will enhance the painting. Do you understand what I'm trying to say here?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So only that is how you can understand mutations. So that one is one advantageous mutation, and you will keep that painting with you. That painting will go on in exhibition and everyone will see it. It will continue to survive. The others you will discard. You will say, oh, it's discarded because it's destroyed. It's not good for putting up in an exhibition. So these are mutations. They are sudden, random, inheritable changes. Now, again, if they are inheritable changes, where should these mutations happen? If a mutation happen in my skin cell, will I be able to pass it on to my next generation? Yes or no? I was exposed to UV radiation, let's say. A human was exposed to UV radiation, and because of that exposure, my skin cells got a mutation. Okay. And because of that mutation, there were some cells, now they are behaving differently, and humans also get skin cancers due to UV exposure, long UV exposure, not very short. But mutation happened clearly. But will I be able to pass on that mutation to my progenies? Yes, no,
No.
yes, no, yes. To pass on anything to my progenies, how will humans pass things to their progenies? Through their gametes, right? Are you understanding, people? There's only one way to pass anything. A father can only pass anything to its son or daughters through the gametes, through sperms. Now, if mutation only happened in my skin cell, but it didn't reach my gametes, I will not be able to pass it on, right? It will just affect me, but my gametes will be normal. Does it make sense?
Yes, sir.
So for mutations to be inheritable, they should reach gamete cells or germ cells. Write it down. Only those mutations are inheritable that happen in the germ cells. This is again, NCERT is not very clear about this term, so people are always confused. So they believe that all mutations are inheritable. If a mutation is happening in a somatic cell, like my skin cell, my hair follicle, my muscle cell, but does not reaches the gamete, it's not inheritable. Okay, but any mutation that happen in germ cells is inheritable. Okay, people?
Yes, sir.
Okay, is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Cool. So tell me, how do you think mutations happen? One, I give you an example of UV exposure. Any other example?
Diseases.
Diseases. Yes. What kind of diseases? Any example where mutation? So diseases do not, you mean diseases cause mutation or mutations cause diseases? That's also a very interesting thing you brought up. So I think mutation causes many genetic disorders and diseases, right? But is there a disease that causes mutations? That's interesting to look at. Okay, but remember, think about it. It's a very good thought. I'll give you a clear-cut answer in next class. I want you to ponder upon it. But for now, remember, anything that causes mutations. So mutations happens due to either physical factors, chemical factors, or biological factors. And all of them, whether they are physical, chemical, or biological, together called mutagens. So mutagens are factors that cause mutation. If a mutagen is physical, so in physical category, mutagens are like UV radiation. It's a physical, right? X-rays can cause mutations. Gamma radiations, these are very high energy radiations, right? And how do they work? They work by providing a lot of energy to the DNA molecule. And when you give energy to any molecule, what does happen? Chemistry 101. When we give energy to molecules, what happens to the molecules?
Heat is generated.
Heat, molecule will heat up, then what will happen? Apart from heating, anything? If I give too much of energy, bonds will break, right? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Sometimes new bonds form. So the chemistry changes. There is breakage of bond, molecule. So DNA breaks down under many radiations. And what happens is when repair happens after breaking down, then there is a mistake in repairing and that leads to mutation. If it is a chemical mutagen, okay, which is this one.
Sir,
Yes.
sir, I have a test in 2 minutes.
Okay, cool. I'm just finishing. Okay, just finishing in 1 minute. So if it's a chemical mutagen, then it's a chemical like one chemical which is a clear mutagen as it's used in it's a bromine derivative. I'm forgetting the name. Okay, so let's do one thing. We'll talk about chemical and biological in the next class since one person has a test. Okay, so you can sign off. We'll meet in the next class and then we'll discuss about mutagens. Please figure out some mutagens of your own and we can discuss their mechanisms. Okay, come up with chemicals which are mutagens and biological factors that are mutagens, and we'll talk about it. Is that okay?